An exciting day. The proverbial cat is out of the box. To discuss the budget and some of its key highlights, we're joined by Mr. Dhiraj Nayyar, Chief Economist, Vedanta, and former Head, Economics, Finance, and Commerce, NITI Aayog. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Nayyar. Thank you so much. Your first
Thank you.
reaction?
I think it's very much on expected lines. I think the Modi government and this particular FM have followed a certain template for their budgets where there is not any large scale tampering or big bang announcements. It's generally a mix of certain short term announcement and measures which depend on the context the economy is in, and then there's a set of visionary statements or futuristic outlook on where they would like the economy to go, say 5, 10, 25 years from now. So I think it's a mix of that, and I think on both fronts, whether it's projecting the vision for the future or in addressing the current context of the economy, it's done a good job. So there's a certain pattern that the budgets of this government follow, in the sense that there's a mix of a long-term vision for economy in certain sectors, and there's a certain bit on the short-term concerns and addressing the economy in its current context. And I think the budget has done both admirably well.
Right. I remember reading your piece, which you penned down a couple of days ago, wherein you said that, like previous budgets, this too will be tailored to PM Modi's long-term, prosperity-oriented approach to governance rather than a short-term populist approach. But then, of course, we have seen that the tax slabs have been revised. Middle class has been given some relief. Would you still stick to your opinion about the budget, Mr. Nair?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the only thing left, in terms of the tax system, you see GST has been done in terms of indirect taxes. A lot of tariff revisions have been done. Corporate taxes were rationalized and brought down. So I think the one thing that was remaining was to give relief and rationalize the structure for the salaried classes. So I think that was this budget to do, and I think they have done that. And I think that's fairly justified given the other tax changes that have happened over the years. This was the one remaining to be addressed. It will help boost the economy in the short term. Growth is solid and resilient, but we need to speed up a little and to sustain. So for that, if you put money into the pockets of the middle class, particularly those are the lower ends of the spectrum, they are likely to spend it more. So I think it's both a measure which was needed in principle, and it will be good in practice as well in terms of boosting growth.
Right. And what do you think about the push for capex?
Yeah, so I think, these are really the two things they've done. If you look at the short term, if you want to look at the short term measures, one is, cutting or rationalizing the tax slabs, not cutting so much, but rationalizing tax slabs. And the other capex push, because private investment is still not at the levels that we want it to be. It's probably 30% of GDP, whereas to grow at 8% or 9%, we need it to be at 35-36% of GDP, and that's because of multiple factors, including the fact that we are in a global slowdown and a lot of uncertainty. So I think, given that scenario, a push in capex, is the natural thing for the government to do, because that will boost growth, multiplier, jobs. And of course, you and I know that the country still needs a lot of infrastructure to be built to be competitive, for its industry to be competitive, for the economy to be competitive. So I think it's, increasing capex is a no-brainer. But I'm glad they've had a significant quantum. It's rather than, smaller amounts, which would have also been useful, but I think this will make a bigger dent.
Right. And would you take, in terms of the market's reactions, the markets, Sensex closed 100 points up and the Nifty actually in red, but just by a few points. So the market's reaction in terms of how the budget was received by the stakeholders?
Again, I'm not sure, whether the stock markets are necessarily the best guide to how the budget was. They react to certain things. So obviously, there's a change in capital gains or dividend tax. There's certain things which make the markets move, whether you raise them or lower these things. But overall, there's nothing that the markets can really find amiss in this budget. There are a lot of other things going on in the market, as you know. So maybe it's those factors as well. But I don't think the market is the right judge for this kind of budget, or indeed for the kind of budgets this government presents, because they tend not to on a yearly basis with certain rates and certain other policies which would cause the market to go up and down on that very day. So I think for the course in terms of the markets, there's nothing they see, but they don't see anything market specifically, delightful in terms of a cut in, say, capital gains tax or dividend issues related to dividend tax. So I think I wouldn't give too much, credence to market reaction on this bit.
Also, do you think this is the kind of budget which will encourage the private sector to increase its capex expenditure, its capital expenditure?
Well, I think certainly, public spending at this particular point in time is likely to crowd in private investment. But also, I like to focus, on a couple of the frontier sectors of the economy, like, the green economy, where certain duty rationalizations have happened, on electric vehicle components, for example. And I think similarly on the digital side, there's this move to set up the centers of excellence and partnership with industry. So I think looking at some of the digital developments in the digital sector and green economy sector, I again think they are trying to focus on a couple of these new age sectors where private investment can rise. Of course, they've already done PLI scheme. There's a scheme for semiconductors and display fab, as you know. So they've done a number of schemes already in previous budgets or even off budget to boost private capex. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. So I think between the public spending and between sector specific policies, focus on sunrise sectors, even on manufacturing, I think you will see a revival of the cycle over the next 12 to 18 months. But as I said, none of these things happen overnight. It's not an immediate response to policy because capex planning takes a while.
All right. The PM, of course, after the budget was tabled by the finance minister, hailed the budget as a budget which has something for everyone. Would you agree? I mean, one cursory glance does suggest that there is something in the budget for everybody. But would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, well, again, I think it's the way you view it. In the past, something for everybody meant something different from what it means now. Back in the past, it usually meant, taxes or indirect taxes on particular commodities went down, so they became cheaper for the user, or, certain schemes were announced, say, for farmers or for, a particular targeted section, with big allocations. So I think it's not that kind of something for everyone, but it's really a more aspirational something for everyone. We're not giving you goodies, but, we are creating opportunities and empowerment for different sections of society, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's the middle class, whether it's women, youth, rural farmers. So I think the focus is much more of, I find, of this government is much more an empowerment and enabling people to do their bit rather than doling out money or large schemes. So yes, there is something in it for everyone, but not in the old style. This is the new kind of new age economy under Modi, where it's aspirational, it enables, it empowers, and you do your thing. You don't wait for small doles from the government. So in that sense, yes, I agree with him. It's something for everyone, but again, not in the way you judged it maybe 10 years ago.
All right. And do you think, I mean, because one sector which came under a lot of stress in the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic, was, of course, the rural economy. Do you think the kind of initiatives which have been announced and, of course, the increased allocation will be able to alleviate the kind of stress that the rural economy has been seeing for the last 2.5 years?
Yeah, I mean, but ironically enough, the one sector which you say the rural economy is in stress, but the one sector which has registered positive growth even during the worst of COVID and lockdown was the agriculture sector. Of course, it doesn't grow like the services and industry sector grows. It grows only at 3-4%, but I don't think there was that much of a the effect of the pandemic was much more on the urban poor and people who had to go back to their villages rather than those who already were living there. That said, of course, I think there is the free food scheme which was already extended before the budget. So I think again, one thing different with this government is they don't wait for the budget to announce what they have to. I mean, they do it throughout the year. So in fact, the rationalization of the free food from COVID into the the Food Security Act was done before the budget. So that's been done, and I think MSMEs, which are again the heart of employment and in many ways, the lifeline for the urban low middle class or even in rural areas, certain people, they've got a good package, a revamped credit guarantee scheme, which will lower the cost of capital, make collateral free loans more easy. So I think there's definitely an ongoing attempt to address those who are in distress. I wouldn't necessarily say there's all in the rural areas, but those certainly were distressed by the pandemic. They have been addressed and they continue to be addressed. But I think that, again, the best antidote to all of this, I mean, you can do small targeted measures. But the best antidote is to just get growth back up and on a sustained basis, because that's what will create opportunities for everyone.
Right, to get growth back up. One of the things which was being talked about before the finance minister tabled the budget in the parliament was the fact that this was going to be a tough balancing act. And to an extent, I mean, based on the reactions which are coming in from the industry, it does seem she might have done a good job. But do you think it is the kind of budget which will also be able to sort of, spur domestic spending, considering exports are not going anywhere, given the global headwinds?
No, I think yes. So I think the big investment push remains the government's initiative. I mean, as you discussed before, that the big increase in capital spending, that itself will do a lot for growth, both in terms of the direct effects and the indirect effects of increasing competitiveness. And I think, as I said, the private sector capex cycle, I think, is now going to revive, because there's certain more or less come past the pandemic, and even China now seems to have come past it and is reopening. Maybe the global economy itself will also give some tailwinds rather than headwinds. And I think in terms of domestic demand, again, the tax rationalization is there. And I think, again, people spend when there's confidence in the economy. So once they see growth picking up on a sustained basis, that spending by consumers will also increase. So I suspect, as we go along in the months ahead, you will see a certain revival. But that said, we are still going to be in the 6 to 7% range. Given the entire global context and the various constraints, and we are likely to be the 8% range, which is what I like to see in the foreseeable future. But you never know. I mean, there's still a lot of opportunities out there, and if you fast track some of those opportunities, you could raise it. But right now, we are good for 6 to 7%, is what I would say. If the global scenario changes significantly, we may be good for more than 7. But for now, I think we are good. But let's remember that good means 6 to 7.
Right. All right. And with that, let me wrap up this interview by asking you, if you were to tell me that what are the 3 things that the finance minister perhaps could have done better, and of course the 3 things which you think she has got spot on.
So, I mean, I think in terms of growth orientation, it's spot on. You've increased capex significantly. You've cut or rationalized taxes for the middle class, and you've maintained a fiscal consolidation glide path, right? I think these 3 things put together are exactly the right things that you need to do to sustain growth and revive capex, private capex going forward. So I would say that's what she's got right. The one miss for me compared to usual budgets is disinvestment. It was not really mentioned, and I think we've been consistently short of targets. I don't think it's an intent issue or an ideological issue. I think the government wants to do it, whether it's asset monetization or disinvestment. I just think that in practice, there are capacity in the system is not yet up to that level to do an aggressive disinvestment, privatization, asset monetization scheme. So, I hope at some point, maybe off budget, they will look at that issue, because I think disinvestment is one place where a lot of revenue can be unlocked, of course, but a lot of efficiency, more than revenue. I'm interested in the efficiency it'll unlock, and boost will give to growth. Because there's some very, very valuable companies there, which, if they are let free, even if you don't sell it to another promoter or private sector promoter, even if you just offload stock in the stock markets, make them like ITC or LNT without a single promoter, but independent companies, board-driven companies. I think that's something which could really give us a 1 percentage point additional growth in the years to come. So I think disinvestment, privatization, asset monetization, I would have liked to hear a little more, but I understand that there are probably constraints, and they don't want to be too ambitious without having given the experience of the last 3 or 4 years.
I think being conservative and realistic at this point in time, given the global scenario, and of course the fact that this is a budget which is being announced right at the end of a pandemic, so to speak, is perhaps the way to go. On that note, thank you for talking to us, Mr. Nayyar. Thank you so much. For the viewers, keep watching The Mint for all our budget-related coverage. Thank you so much.